Hey everyone. Andrei Zinkevich is the co-founder of FullFunnel.io, and he's also the host of the FullFunnel B2B Marketing Podcast. In this episode, I got a chance to sit down with Andrei and chat with him about his company, his podcast, and really to pick his brain about all things full funnel marketing. We discussed things like account-based marketing, how it contributes to pipeline, like what are the main KPIs that you really want to be measuring and how they're probably further in than you are currently measuring them. And then also why some of the best marketers were salespeople in their past lives. And it was a really good episode. So let's get into it. So, Andre, it's great having you on the show.
Thanks a lot for inviting me. Excited to chat with you about all things related to full funnel marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think it's interesting, right? We have a lot of listeners that are very much interested in this exact topic, and I know we're going to get into some deep dive stuff. But before we do that, maybe you can tell a little bit about yourself and what you guys do.
Yeah, absolutely. So the funny fact is that lots of people are asking me, how were you involved in full funnel marketing and ABM, account based marketing, right? And just to answer this question, I will give you one idea. I started my career as a sales rep or SDR, right? And I spent first 5 years in sales, and then I was always wondering, like in sales, we always had our sales quota, right? And the request to hit the sales quota. So always the pressure coming from the execs. Now, like the more I was working in sales, the more I was wondering if there any way how can we stimulate our customers to buy more. How can we stimulate, instead of doing this like lead generation, instead of reaching out to new customers, right? Is there any way how like we can create a demand for our products, so more customers will be reaching for us? So basically, at that time I was working for Kimberly Clark Corporation, so we were selling these well-known brands. And my idea was like, if we can create more demand, so these, let's say, smaller customers can purchase more items from us. And that motivated me to learn marketing. And then I was switched to marketing and started working as a key account marketer. And my market was limited to 50 accounts. So then, when your market is limited to 50 accounts, you have nothing else to do than account-based marketing, right? And this is how I learned it the hard way, without any software, without any MarTech vendors, etc. So basically, after 8 years in the corporate world, that's why I know very well the enterprise in-house buying process and the entire, let's say, cuisine. I switched to consulting. I launched my local marketing agency, and then in 2017, I launched a company called Get Leader, which now is rebranded to FullFunnel.io, right? And what we're doing at FullFunnel.io is that we're helping B2B tech companies with high ACV and long sales cycle, installing account-based marketing and full funnel framework to land consistently enterprise opportunities.
So I love that you have that sales background. I think one of the things that marketers struggle with is the empathy that's sort of needed in this job for sales. If you lived on quota and you live and die on a number and that's your main focus, you it's a different mentality sometimes than if you're on a salary and maybe a portion of your compensation is based on a target, but usually it's a pretty small portion as a marketer. And one of the things that I love, and sometimes you'll hear me say this, but some of the best marketers started out as salespeople. And because they know what the pain points are, they're talking to the market, they're in the middle of it, right? And they're really getting a sense for who their ICP is, where their pain points are, and how to talk to them. And that carries forward, right? From job to job, right, along your career path. But that skill set that you develop never goes away. So I love that you started out that way. So how do you um how do you describe, let's say, what you do? So there's a lot of talk around things like demand gen and ABM, and I have a take on it, but I'd love to hear like your perspective in terms of like like, what does that mean to you? And then, like, how does that translate to when you talk internally to companies, and when you have conversations about like what it is that you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a very good question, and I always describe it with one diagram showing the full funnel framework, right? And because I don't believe that we can just split marketing into some areas like ABM, demand gen, demand capture, and whatever, brand marketing, and then work with just one of these strategies. It makes no sense for if we want to have, let's say, if we are thinking about the long-term growth, right? Marketing is like a complex discipline of all of these activities. That's why we call it full funnel, right? And when it comes to full funnel, we have 6 main stages, and it means that we must, as marketers, we must work on each of the stages. So the first one is awareness, right? It's logical if like companies are not aware of our product, of what we are doing, of our message, right? There are like miserable chances that we're able to generate opportunities. I'm talking, of course, I'm talking about high ticket products, right? I'm not talking about like $5 subscriptions, right? And the key point is that we can't sell 5-6 figure B2B tech products as a pair of shoes, right? As a pair of Nike. So that's one of the points. So we must to create awareness. Next one, when we attract the attention, right? The next one is to create the demand. And how can we create the demand? Basically, we must somehow showcase that our product or our service can help to solve specific issues, right? And this could be done with multiple case studies, with like customer stories, and so on and so on, right? With like educational webinars, etc. Then the demand capturing. So the next goal, and this is the part how we combine demand generation and account-based marketing. As you can see, these are not separated disciplines or operations, right? So the next part is demand capture, and our goal is identifying the engaged leads. Of course, we need to define what engagement threshold stands for, right? What account should do to be engaged, right? Could be visiting our product page multiple times, attending like some bottom of the funnel webinars or product webinars, requesting like case studies, whatever, visiting like top case studies on our website, like we define it, right? And the next step is basically the activation part. So when it comes to activation, our goal is not sending the generic message, right? Saying, hey, so I saw that you attended our webinar. Would you be able to, or would you be up to talk to me about my product, right? This approach doesn't work. So the goal is to run the account research. Next, the buying committee research, because in B2B, we sell to people ultimately, right? We sell to multiple people. Traditionally, we have 4 core roles. So the champions, the decision makers, influencers, and blockers. And we need to understand what are their goals, what are their KPIs, right? And how can basically we personalize our pitch. We need to find the gap between our solution and their needs and goals. So that's the next part. And finally, the personalized outreach, right? So after this, usually the sales funnel ends. But the truth is that the real relationship starts here. So once we acquired a new customer, we have the client success. And most companies, unfortunately, think about client success as like a passive function. So basically live chat, customer forum, tickets, whatever, thinking that their customers are happy by default, right? If they are not complaining, they're happy, they're satisfied. But the truth is that this is the process where we need to install customer interviews. There are lots of conversations on LinkedIn about customer interviews, but talk to 10 companies, to 10 B2B companies, I bet that 9 of them have never spoke to their customers, right? And the key insights, what we are going to do here, right, is collecting insights about why did they select us, with whom they compared our products, so what are the alternatives they were thinking about, what channels they used to search for the information, all of that stuff, who was involved into the purchasing process, like what motivated them to select our product. Lots of insights that we can use to improve our, let's say, top of the funnel activities and double down on the activities that actually attracted attention and generated demand, right? Next one is tracking satisfaction and basically helping customers to get the value from the product, right? To give you a precise example, if we are selling enterprise software and there are multiple end users, and believe that, let's say, 80% of them are not using the product. And then at one point, our champion changes. New person comes, new person sees that 80% of people are not using the product. What should be the logical step, right? Churn. So basically, and we are losing enterprise customer without ever getting any notification or complaint, right? And that's the truth. So that's why we need to track this. And finally, when we know that our customer got the value, it's time to talk about the value. What's the value you got from the product? Because this is the way how we can improve our positioning and value proposition, right? Asking for the case studies, because also asking for the referrals, testimonials, etc. What most companies are doing, they're sending, $20 gift card saying, hey, so if you leave review on Capterra or G2 Crowd, you'll get this $20 Amazon card. But what if I didn't get anything from your product? You never asked me what's my success, right? So that's the most important part. And this is the opportunity where most companies don't leverage at all. Deal expansion. So we have satisfied customer, and imagine we are selling to a company that have multiple branches, right? That's the lowest hanging fruit. So we can create a case study here and start upselling to other branches and using the champion from this organization. This is these are the fundamentals of account-based marketing. So these are the most important parts. Like client success was the fifth one, and the last one is the expansion campaigns. And when I'm explaining these 6 stages with a visual diagram explaining quickly the key activities that we are doing on each of the stages, it totally makes sense to everybody. And as you can see, I don't separate account-based marketing from demand generation. I'm not saying that I'm not initiating the conversations inbound versus outbound, demand gen versus lead gen. It makes no sense. This all normal marketing and sales. Oh, nowadays we used to call it RevOps.
So that last sentence is exactly what for me, it's like when we talk about ABM. So ABM category was created by a lot of vendors and Terminus and Sixth Sense, et cetera, right? You've got these different folks that are out there, demand, and so one of the things that I look at, and we talk about that trend. We talk about everybody being a media company today, right? That's a trend, and I kind of think the funny thing about it is, at the end of the day, if you sort of take away the buzzwords and you take away the way that people talk about it today, we're just in reinventing a lot of what was really working before we had a lot of the attribution tools that we have today, right? So what I mean by that, we've sort of I don't know if this is the right word, but it feels like we've over rotated a little bit towards we want to be able to track everything from beginning to end. And I think ultimately the stuff that was working before we could track anything the way that we can track it today is where we're moving back to, in a lot of sense, right? It's content, it's building an audience, it's understanding who your audience is and what keeps them up at night. It's all of those things that qualitative and the qualitative research that you do on your perfect ICP is really that depth, that you used to have to do when you did things like catalogs and when you did things like, direct mail and, those sorts of things where you couldn't track it until you sent it, right? And the investment was really heavy up front on things like the creative and the research. Testing, and then you would track and see what would happen, but only after you front loaded all of the costs, right? So it forced you to think about things differently than I think maybe what marketers have gotten used to over the last, I don't know, 10 or 15 years, right? Where, it's direct click from a paid search ad, and I can see what the ROI is on that. Well, that doesn't work in a more complex sales cycle, right? And, we know this just from sort of doing it every day, but I think marketers sometimes miss that. They come from a transactional sale type company, or maybe a smaller ACV product like you were talking about, where in a lot of ways there's a direct connection between the traffic on the site, and the sale that happens in a 24-hour window. And that's not necessarily the way it works in B2B. And I think we've sort of, as marketers, sometimes we look at maybe the wrong metrics, the wrong KPIs that drive the real business outcomes that we're looking for. So I think that's my next question, which is like, what sort of KPIs are the ones that you pay attention to like every day, right? Like there's some that you maybe review once a month or once a quarter or whatever, but the ones that are really top of mind for you when you wake up in the morning and you're looking at a campaign or you're looking at a business.
Yeah, absolutely. So I believe, we can split this answer, and we can chat initially about the metrics. And then I would love to just give my 5 cents on what you have said about the attribution and, like, let's say, the old school marketing that still works nowadays. I would love to give several examples that when I'm sharing this with marketers, they are staring at me and said, hey, so I had no idea that could work that way. So, but let's come back to your question about the metrics.
Sure.
Right? I believe that there should be one core revenue report that makes sense to everybody: marketing, sales, and executives. And this core revenue report shouldn't be really complicated. So this report should include several metrics. Number one, number of sales qualified opportunities generated that month. Next one, the win rate. Next one, the sales cycle length. Next one, the ACV. And if we'll use this metrics, right, if we'll multiply the number of sales qualified opportunities by ACV and by win rate and divide this by sales cycle length, we'll get the pipeline velocity. Why it makes sense to track it that way? Because if our sales cycle length is, let's say, 10 months, there are no silver bullets. There is no magic wand, to drastically shorten the sales cycle. Unfortunately, I wish I could be the hacks, but the reality is that we just need to accept this is the reality. This is our standard sales cycle. And this way, right, we can track the revenue trajectory. So with the help of sales pipeline velocity, if we apply this formula, we'll see where we are going. And obviously, of course, we track the revenue this month. But why it makes sense to track it that way? Because if you start doing ABM, you launch the pilot campaign, then you start launching new pilot campaigns but with new goals, and you operationalizing it. Let's say you start doing like new demand generation activity. You won't be able to generate sales qualified opportunities immediately. No way. Like you can, there would be some results, right? But they would be far from the results that you'll be getting in 10, in 11 months. And just to track that it's going the right way, you need to track the sales pipeline velocity. Now, there might be a question, and this is my second part when it comes to this answer, right? For every single campaign, you need to set up leading indicators. And this is how this leading indicator should be tied to the revenue report. Let's say account-based marketing, right? And of course, depending, because I mentioned this already, depending on the goal we are setting up for the campaign, right? There would be different metrics. But let's say traditionally, when it comes to ABM, everybody thinks in terms of net new sales qualified opportunities and net new revenue. So in this case, what could be the right metrics? Accounts in the campaign. Next, engaged accounts, right? And again, we mentioned this already. You need to define what the engagement threshold is, right? With how many buying committee members you were able to connect, right? Next, reply rate, positive reply rate, the cost of acquisition and or cost per sales qualified opportunity. And this, if you use these metrics, right, you'll be able then compare to, because you don't need to look at, let's say, market benchmarks. Your business is unique and you need just compare to, your campaign with the campaigns that you have done in the past. And when you have these engaged accounts, right, then you can see that, okay, from, if let's say I had 30 accounts in my pilot campaign, then I had 10 engaged accounts, and then I generated 2 sales qualified opportunities, let's say in 6 months. Now you can tie it to revenue report, right? But it didn't happen immediately. That's why I'm saying. So when you know that you have, let's say, when ABM becomes not one-time campaign, but your regular operations, you can then always see in your, let's say, in your pipeline, you can say, okay, we have like 20 engaged accounts, you can expect 4 sales qualified opportunities in the next 6 months. And more or less, you will be able to create a forecast. So when it comes to demand generation, the same. You can create, I don't believe that it makes sense to measure, it's lots of conversations on LinkedIn, impressions, whatever. You won't be able to pay the bills with impressions, with likes of your content, etc. What makes sense? Again, engaged accounts, right? So if and you define the demand engagement threshold, did they consume your, let's say, core vertical case study? Did they check the product page? Did they attend some of your webinars, right? Again, with how many of the buying committee members you were able to connect. But always, we believe, and this like maybe something unique about our approach, we always say that there should be manual warm-up campaign when you involve target accounts into any kind of content collaboration. Could be, participating in the market research, co-hosting an event, giving the quotes for your article, being a guest on your podcast, whatever, right? But any kind of human interaction, that's crucial. So, and this is another metric. And then you tie it to the revenue report. You can call it, if you want to simplify it, you can call it marketing qualified leads. For me, I know lots of conversations that MQL definition is that it's only about how you measure this, right? In this case, you can call it engaged accounts or MQLs, because they are not sales qualified leads at all. When they pass the engagement threshold and you have done the account research, and you are connected to the buying committee, and that there is a need that you can solve, then you can say, okay, this is like a sales qualified opportunity, the sales qualified lead. You do the activation part, and if they're ready to talk to you, then you have the opportunity. So this is when it comes to metrics. Core revenue report, which is simplified version of sales pipeline velocity calculator, and then you have leading indicators for every single campaign, right? Does it make sense to you?
Yeah, I honestly, I love the structure with which you articulated that, because I think one of the things that we as marketers, try that one again. I think one of the things that we as marketers have a challenge with is articulating as clearly as you just did how we are contributing, our campaigns are contributing to pipeline and revenue and business outcomes, right? So I'm going to say there's a lot of stuff that's overlapping with what you just said, but I'm going to maybe reiterate and then maybe add one or two. But mine is, as I'm looking at our business, right, when I'm running my, my campaigns, when I'm thinking about things, I work my way backwards from business objectives, right? So I'm primarily looking at things like pipeline revenue, CAC, LTV, unit economics, et cetera, right? Really trying to make sure that not only are we aligning with what the business objectives are for the year, but also, how efficient we are as we continue to ramp, right, and scale. And then I work my way backwards from that into what you were describing, which is really more things like, the pipeline velocity, close rate, win rates, new pipeline created, that sort of thing. And I typically look at those on a daily basis just to have good sense, especially if I'm new to a role. Like I'm going to want to get a real pulse on what's happening, just to level set a little bit. And then, I can, working my way continually up, I'm thinking about things like, what's my new high intent hand raisers that are coming in on a daily basis, right? And what's the conversion rate from that demo request to actual, SQO, right? And what's created, because that's a huge leading indicator to me, like, and I can see that on a daily basis, and I can feel, you're not, nobody can see this if you're listening to the podcast, but I'm putting that in air quotes, but I can feel sort of what's happening, and then I can see it and back it up with some numbers. And then sort of going further up, I'm thinking about things like, is the type of traffic that I'm looking for, that I know is going to create my MQL, sort of hand raisers or demo requests, going in the right direction, right? So, that's obviously an indicator of, are my campaigns working or not, in the various channels. But, things like, specifically three things. It's going to be things like direct, organic, right? Branded PPC. I really want to know, like, are people responding to what I'm doing? And then, especially in things like paid social, and then as they hit the, I'm looking at homepage, because obviously that's where a lot of that growth is, ended up coming from. Or even if I have dedicated landers, a lot of it's just branded that comes back to the homepage. So are those healthy, and sort of those curves moving in the right direction? And then I look at a couple of things that, like, that you and I think probably agree on, but I just want to sort of gut check here. But it's going to be things like, every morning, like, I want to look at things like, what are my closed won and closed lost reasons, right? So we capture that in the CRM, and we can see what's going on. And then I'm also tying that to the self-reported responses that are happening when somebody requests a demo. So in other words, like, how did you hear about us? We ask a specific question in that form that says, how did you hear about us? And then I tie all of that together, right, to see a complete picture of what's actually happening from, from the beginning that actually, drove somebody to the site to begin with, and then all the way through the funnel into the sales pipeline, what's happening in the sales pipeline to a closed won deal. And I start to notice patterns, right, in that activity all the way through. And my thing is we're going to talk about attribution in a second, but, my thing is, like, if you can't have that sort of holistic view from beginning to end, you're going to struggle, right? You're going to struggle as a marketer, and because you're not going to be able to articulate to leadership, or to non-marketing executives, how effective your campaigns are, where you're cutting back, for less effective campaigns, where you're doubling down on better campaigns. Like, you can't articulate what the executives really need, which is the business outcomes, and, specifically things like pipeline and revenue. You can't talk to sales and have an intelligent conversation with sales saying, these are the reasons why your closed won deal percentages are going up, right? Your win rates are going up. You can't articulate why the pipeline velocity is improving, unless you're able to sort of, like, pull all of that together. So, so let's talk about attribution. By the way, this is one of my favorite topics. I have a little soapbox that I get up on, and I'll talk about it all day long. But I would love to hear your perspective, because, when we think about long sales cycle, 60 to 6 months, 60 days to 6 months or something like that, that is, high ACV product, because it's not directly, like a 24-hour, look back window. Like, what is what is your take on attribution, particularly with a B2B product with a decent sized ACV?
I would tell you, and in the beginning you were talking a lot about, like, the problem with that most marketers think about digital marketing, and it's all enough to set up the digital ads and track the conversion, etc. But unfortunately, the buying process in B2B is way more complicated. And the higher is your market, the higher is the price of your product, the more sophisticated and complicated your sales cycle will be. Now, let me give you a precise example that will probably answers your question perfectly. So our recent customer, one of the biggest so far for my company, for FullFunnel.io. So with this customer, if you are going to Google Analytics and you'll open the conversion, you'll see direct conversion. So the source of traffic, direct conversion. Now, what gives it to me? No idea, right? Of course, there might be arguments that you can like add more end-to-end software analytics, which I honestly doesn't need. But anyhow, I will get some more digital traces. But now I was talking about the customer interviews. So when we won the contract, right, I was interviewing CMO of that company. And I was asking, like, can you please explain what? That's usually my first question I'm asking. And we as well have this forum. How did you hear about us, right? So that's really crucial. But aside this, like the core insights are coming from the customer interview. So my first question is like, what was going on in your business? What motivated you to start searching for the solutions like ours, or for vendors like FullFunnel.io, right? And he was explaining, look, I wasn't actively looking for the solution, but I realized, so we were good like with mid-market, but we tried multiple campaigns. We tried to do the same campaigns that we did for SMB, and it didn't work at all for enterprise. So even like the cost per engagement was really high, and cost per engagement means that they were running some gated ebooks or promoting webinars, and the cost per sign up was extremely high, right? So I was looking for some topics about enterprise marketing, and then I have heard about ABM, and then I opened LinkedIn and just saw multiple posts. And what resonated with me when I saw one of your pieces of content, and it was like, not only it was like you were clearly articulating the points, right, but also you were providing this like diagrams and frameworks, etc. So I started following you. Next, you guys were running the FullFunnel Summit. So I have seen your announcement, but no, I didn't. I'm talking, I'm quoting, citing CMO right now. So he said, like, I didn't even see the announcement from you, but one from the speakers that was at your summit. So I sent this to my marketers. Marketers attended your session and they loved it, right? So next step, we have seen this. We have this website identification software, right? So we have seen that this company attended, like we had this engagement, and usually our junior marketer tracks this and adds this to the CRM. So the next step, we were reaching out and asking, like, how did you like our session? We never, reach out with the pitch. This like makes no sense, and it's too early if we wanted to do this, right? So they provided the feedback, and we also saw that we have common connections now with the CMO, but he is still second degree connection. So I sent it, and asked, did you attend as well? And no, I didn't attend, but my team attended, and like that's it. There was no conversation. Then we have seen that some of these marketers joined our Slack community called Trenches, and they were engaging with our posts. Then I have seen that they started to, to engage with our content, and one of marketers told me, you know what, I have sent your framework in our Slack, and basically everybody told that totally makes sense, and our CMO loved it. So I reached out to him again, asking like, any questions about the framework, got like positive feedback from your team. Again, no reply. Next, we were hosting the webinar called Zero to ABM. And I just sent a manual invite saying, hey, so because I know that you loved our frameworks, that might be valuable for you. I'm assuming that you guys somewhere in the transition to enterprise marketing and want to launch ABM. That's why I believe it might be valuable for you and for your team. Zero reply, but sign-ups. After the webinar, 2 weeks pause, but now I see that they engage with our content hub. And this is like third-party solution. We use Paperflight, where we created the dedicated ABM case studies Content Hub. And then after this, we also added a link to book a call with us. And then no interaction, but 1 week later, the guy reaches us out on LinkedIn and adds me and Vladimir, my co-founder, creates a group chat and saying, "Hey guys, we love what you are doing, so let's have a call. How can you help us with installing account-based marketing?" Yeah. Look at this and look at what attribution software says. I think that's a brilliant example where it falls down.
Yeah. So how do you articulate that to a non-marketing executive? How do you articulate that sort of mentality or journey of what buyers are really doing to somebody who's like a CFO who's saying, I'm like, at the end of the day, I'm looking at, dollar in, dollar out, like sort of a binary thing. Like, how do you articulate that problem and like what's the solution for it?
Yeah, two ways. But first of all, let me mention that usually in our case, we have like with our clients, right? Because we don't do this lead gen or outbound, we usually have like a full buy-in from our clients. So we never have these conversations. But that said, sometimes we face this because, let's say, CFO is not involved into like marketing and sales, right? But this might happen. So two ways I'm explaining this. The first one, I'm saying, hey, so let's talk together about your recent expensive purchasement, right? So tell me what was the software or service you paid like 5 or 6 figures. They tell me, they share with me, and I'm saying, okay, now let's talk. How did you buy it? Did you buy it because you have seen the ad, or like a guy sent you, I don't know, cold message on LinkedIn? No. So share with me how your products look like. And they explain, hey, so I did this research, I went there and there, right? I checked these case studies, I checked the reviews, I talked to some of the peers, etc., etc., etc. So I'm saying, why do you think that your customers are different? Now, that's not the final dot, right? To finally persuade this, I usually ask marketer to initiate the convo with one of the key clients and ask the same questions, right? But about their product. And then we come with these insights, right? You just show this. And then I'm saying, why do you think your customers are different? Look at this interview. Look what your customers are saying. Usually that's enough.
So it's interesting. I love that you make it personal to them and you ask them, how do you buy? Right? Like, what was your experience? Because when you start making it personal, it starts connecting the dots on, oh, that does make sense. That is like a logical flow for how people are buying. And it doesn't line up. Like if you juxtapose it against a straight funnel, it doesn't line up, the way that buyers are really buying. So it's not really like this, it's really more like this, right? And that leads to a change, at least in my experience anyway, a change in the organizational understanding about how they measure marketing activity and performance. If you can get over that hump, which sometimes you can and sometimes you can't in organizations. Like, I love that you're looking at your own funnel, as an inbound thing where you've already educated the buyer. They already buy into and understand your way of thinking and your take on the world, right? And then they come in and they're already sort of pre-baked in a lot of ways. It makes that conversation a lot smoother, a lot easier. And then, but if you haven't, you need to have that conversation. And it's a hard conversation to have, especially if you can't articulate it clearly. So you've got to, from a marketing perspective, you need to sort of have your ducks in a row and some data that helps support it. And so what I tell people when they come and they ask me, questions like that, it's like, hey, how did you do it? I think, well, first of all, we have a great organization that buys into and trusts marketing. And I think, there's always that, you need that dynamic. But secondly, I would say I point to like actual data like in our CRM. And, I point to that life of the lead discussion that we had a little while ago, where we were talking about like how people are like self-reporting, connecting that to what they actually did on site, right? That could be content consumption, it could be case study, third-party testimonials, what have you, right? More information about the product. You can see that, like those various touch points that they've interacted with our sales reps. Like I can see all of that in what we refer to as the life of the lead in our product. And then what we do is we can see all of those different touch points, and then we start finding commonalities for what ends up driving a closed won deal, right? And I actually flip it, and I start with the closed won deal, and I start with closed loss deals, and I do retros. We do this with the sales team like every couple of weeks or every month. Is we'll look at example closed won and closed loss deals, and we'll figure out like the 12 touch points. I'm making that number up, but roughly 12 touch points that show like they interacted with our BDR, or they interacted with us on our chatbot, or they exchanged an email, with somebody, or they've asked a question, or they're consuming case study content around their particular industry, that sort of thing. And it starts to build a profile of who your customer is, and then also connects to like how they came in. So like, did they come in through paid search or what have you on the demand capture side? And then the critical piece is the connection from that to the self-reported, right? It's like, okay, well, I heard about you on your podcast, and I passed that podcast along to that specific episode along to my, my VP of marketing, and they listened to it, and they're like, this is exactly our problem you guys are talking about, right? And, it's that sort of dynamic. And that is sort of leading to the on-site behavior that's driving the outcome you want. And so when you start making that real, and you show that almost like actually I do like show it in a graphical format, what happens is like things click, things connect, and it makes it easier to talk about like how you do things like paid social and other things. So I have another question for you, and I know we're running out of time, but I'm trying to squeeze this one in. I'm fascinated to know the answer. So you came out of a sales background, right? So you're a salesperson turned demand marketer. What advice do you have for an SDR who might either be starting out or is moving along in their career? What do you tell them, given what you know about sort of holistically, both sides of the
Yeah.
coin?
So I usually start the conversation with one question. Like I just ask, do you agree that people buy from people they know, like, and trust? And they usually nod in their heads, saying, yeah, I'm agree. So I'm saying in this case, you need to somehow make sure that they know, like, and trust it. And that's why I explained that you guys, you must be involved into marketing, or let's say demand operations. Why? Because if you are not just spam, let's make it clear. Nobody wants to just hang out with an SDR on a sales call, right? Ask anybody, ask any random person right now on LinkedIn, and you'll hear, no way, nobody wants to hang out with sales people if you're not requested this, correct? So that's the first part. Now, your goal, instead of being perceived as an SDR, your goal is to be perceived as a trusted advisor. So in my case, I was even at that part. I started to pair marketing or start doing marketing operations, collecting like different customer insights from our key accounts, because then it gave me an opportunity to come to another account and say, hey, you know what? I spoke to 3 other retail chains and I got these insights. I saw that might be valuable for you. I always had a reason to meet, right? That's an opportunity. And the more, let's say, your content will be created and published on LinkedIn, it will create so-called engagement triggers for you. Then you can always use this as an opportunity to open the conversation. I'm not saying pitch, but open the conversation. That's so crucial, right? Next one is getting the customer insights. Don't pass it only to the client success team, only to the marketing team, right? The more you'll understand what triggered your customers to buy, the more you'll have engagement triggers in your toolkit. Because now if you'll open, right, these different intent triggers or engagement triggers, if you'll search for this on Google, you'll get an article with probably a company called Sales Rocks, if I'm correct, created like an article with like 50 intent triggers or whatever. But the truth is your business is unique, right? You need to create your own toolkit of these triggers, and you can understand what triggered your customers to buy only when you'll be talking to them, right? So that's really crucial, building this relationship. Next one is thinking, if you're on a B2B, you need to understand that you're not selling to companies, but you are selling to multiple people inside one organization, and you have the buying committee, and these people have different reasons and needs to buy, right? And before reaching out, before connecting, you must do your homework, right? You need to run the account research. You need to understand what's going on in this company, what's their strategy, what might be the potential need when it comes to a product. And now do the same research for every buying committee member, understanding the reasons why they might purchase and why they might not purchase your product. This is so crucial, I believe. And finally, I completely agree. The pipeline review meetings are crucial. This is like a part of marketing and sales alignment, right? We know this is like a big problem for most B2B companies. So the pipeline review is crucial because then you share the insights, and then the ultimate goal, why we in the beginning called this RevOps, right? Revenue operations, because now you have this account. And you say, okay, guys, so we did this. Marketing presents maybe like the activities that were done on the top of the funnel, right? And the engagement. Sales mentions, okay, so we try to connect with the buying committee. I was able to talk to this guy who is our champion, right? Let's discuss together. Let's brainstorm. How can we activate this account? This is so crucial, right? This is the most important part. The first thing that you can do is saying, hey, so I don't know what our marketing team is doing. Like, just give me the budget. I know what to do with this money. I'm going to buy some gifts or hang out with like my clients and I will just hit my quota. No way. You need to involve marketing and also be a part of it. Because at the end of the day, this is like a team sport. This is like the most common advice I'm giving.
So I love that because I think at the end of the day, you have um, a mentality that is a big shift from what SDRs are typically taught. You know, it's all about volume. It's all about, you know, just dial the numbers and do the tasks and get the it's a quantity game. And there's an
Game
element
of
of that
numbers.
for sure. Yeah, there's an element of that for sure. But at the end of the day, yeah, people buy in a lot of ways. People buy from brands and from people, right? And those two things like are those two elements are telling the story about why you believe what you believe and how your particular product can solve their pain point, right? And can like what's your take on the world, like all of those things are matter when it comes to trying to separate yourself from all of the other alternatives that are out there, because the alternatives that people face are not just your product versus somebody else's. It's a different way of doing something. It's a different workflow. It's, you know, it could be different, you know, company structure. Like you're facing a lot of different choices. That's more than just, you know, apples versus apples, you know, CRM versus CRM selection or what have you, right? It's you know, there are a lot of different macro elements that you're also, you know, sort of having to cut through the clutter for. You know, and that's where that's where the value proposition, the messaging and everything comes in. I love that. I think it's a great way to sort of educate SDRs on how to hit their number and how to be better at their jobs. And I think that's good advice. So, okay. So, you have laid down like a lot of really practical knowledge around things like, like the KPIs that you need and how to articulate things to, executives, for a different way of doing things, a better way perhaps to do things, right? How does somebody like how did you learn? Like who do you follow? What do you read? What kind of information and sources do you that have you sort of intake, over the years? Like where do you hang out? Like how do you get information and
And
how to do things better and learn?
this leads me to the beginning of our conversation. As I mentioned, most of the things I learned the hard way, right? Even for the account-based marketing and the attribution, I wanted to share this example earlier, just a very good, precise example of how ABM was done, in the early days of my career without 6 cents terminals, etc.
Yeah.
So just to give
Yeah.
you, and how it could be done differently, that net new revenue. So in one area, I had like a retail chain, right? And they were like comparing. We had three main groups of products. So the baby diapers, the fem care, and the household care, right? And they were purchasing just only a small part of fem care items comparing to our biggest competitors, Procter and Gamble and SCA. We had like probably 5% of share in that chain, but I believe that it could be way more. I tried to build relationship. I was SDR at that point, not marketer. So with the guy who was like responsible for that fem care products, I was chatting with him, and one day I just invited him, for the lunch, just discussing, some stuff. And then I was asking, like, by the way, like, I tried, to talk to your like VP of like purchasing department, and he never accepted, my invite, like any chance to get, to him. And the guy liked me, and he liked good food, so that was like a good win for me. So he gave me an insight. He said, like, look, this guy is a big fan of local soccer team, and I was playing all my life. I was playing soccer. I'm like, oh my gosh. So what I did, I just purchased, 2 VIP tickets for the next local game and sent it to him. Now, I was not going to that game. I just said, take a kid or wife or whatever and enjoy the next game and like let our team, win. And then the guy, emailed me because I mailed him multiple times. I tried to call, he never replied back. But then he replied to one of the past email saying, hey, thanks a lot for the tickets, appreciate it, like up for the coffee next week. So I'm coming next week. We chatted about the football. No, we call it football in Europe, right? Soccer. So we chatted about this, and then he asked, like, by the way, do you also play soccer? And I was playing professionally. They then got injured and switched to the futsal, right? So I was playing in the like business league there for Kimberly Clark. And I said, yeah, but I'm also, and he told, we also have our team. So like, would you up to, come one day and play with us? So I came one day and we built like a good relationship. And then I said, like, look, can you just, then we were chatting after some time. And I was like, by the way, like, why you were ignoring me, and what's the, like, why you don't buy, all our other stuff? And then he shared with me there were like internal conflict with ex like regional manager who didn't work for the company. He had a personal conflict, and we just solved it. And just believe me, like in 1 year, that was our biggest client, the biggest client, because they were purchasing everything. Now coming back to ABM, direct mail, attribution, right? I didn't do net new revenue campaign, right? It was deal expansion. It was talking to buying committee, getting these practical insights, and then building the relationship, right? And if you try to attribute it to anything, like for CFO, it will make no sense. It will be a cost. I bought tickets to the VIP sector, so how can you attribute it to revenue? But these are the results that came in 1 year. This is really crucial, right? So most of the things I learned the hard way. Next, I believe that aside from reading marketing and sales stuff, you need to read, let's say, product categories. I try to get insights from other like fields. I love Nassim Taleb, for example. His recent book,
Mhm.
and not recent, but anti-fragile book, whatever, people have different opinion about it. But if you apply it to marketing, what he says is that you need to build multiple modes and streams of demand for your product to make it anti-fragile. Let's say if something happens, right, you are still in business, you are not going out of business. This is what he is saying, right? The same,
Yep.
you'll find lots of insights about like experimentation. The same, like Almanac of Naval Ravikant, fantastic book. So lots of these things. When it comes to marketing, like on LinkedIn, you can find lots of practitioners. I believe Chris Walker is top when it comes to demand gen. Karina
Mhm.
Owens from Gong, she is senior ABM manager there. She is top when it comes to account-based marketing. Very humble and very practical. Um, this, like, again, you can find in Europe, we have Tiba series, my top recommendation for SDRs, for BDMs, for everybody who is in sales, like a fantastic guy. So Daryl Alfonso from Amazon when it comes to marketing operations and MarTech. So I mean, you can always do your own research and you can find these top-notch professionals, right? And they can, if you want to get these practical marketing insights, you'll learn a lot from them. All of them usually have their podcasts, newsletters, whatever, so you can just subscribe
Yeah.
and learn. So
I
this,
think I think it's valuable. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah. I just wanted to say, like, I think you shouldn't limit yourself only to one channel, right? Because I'm
Yeah.
getting this when it comes to practical marketing insights, right? Aside from I learned it the practical way, I'm getting this from LinkedIn, from newsletters, from podcasts. So it shouldn't be, just one place where you consuming the information. But what I wanted to say is that when it comes to different books, right? In this case, when it comes to books, I'd rather say don't try to read like the marketing books. Don't read about tactics. That's for sure. Try to find the fundamental things. When it comes to copywriting, right? If this is something that you want to learn, just listen to classics, people who nailed it, right? Try to read the fundamentals. Try to step away from the marketing and sales category and learn like, even if you want to understand sales and nail sales, right, read Dale Carnegie's books. This, you'll learn a lot. Robert Cialdini, right? And these are not sales books, but I believe you'll get much more value and insights
Yeah.
that will skyrocket your career.
I love how you talked about like cross discipline information, because I think what it ends up doing is making you a deeper person, because like something happens in your mind that connects those things together. And say, like when you're reading something in philosophy or you're reading something in engineering, and like, you connect that to some application that you have when you're working your day job, right, and you're doing your work. And there is such a crossover, in some of these things that help sort of, I think that plus the fundamentals like you were talking about helps you to understand better the why underneath why you're doing something. And I was having this conversation with somebody the other day where we were talking about how so many marketers tend to like just they want to download the playbook and be able to just execute on the playbook. They want to they want to hand it off to a marketing manager or something, and then they just go and execute the steps. And then they wonder why the thing fails. And they don't, it's because, right, they don't understand the why underneath the core reason why the playbook was built, or what have you, and how it specifically applies to your application, or how it applies to you, right? So I think just those two things, like deepening your knowledge and being able to do that. And then, I mean, I'm just going to say this, right? Like, we're all busy. We all most likely are working more than 40 hours a week, right? And, a lot of that is just like there's a mentality of like time. I just don't have the time. But I would just encourage anybody who's listening to this that there are things that you're doing right now whether it's, in your 9 to 5 or it's even afterwards, that's probably less valuable than being able to build yourself up, not only like as a human being, right, but and grow and deepen yourself, but also in your future career path too. And it's like everything's an opportunity cost at the end of the day, right? If you want to invest
Priority.
in yourself, it's an opportunity cost, and you want to make sure that you're investing in the right areas. And obviously, investing in yourself is the best thing you can do, or other people, right? And so I think um that that is like a different way, like if you think about like a common trait of the most successful people that uh, that's pretty high up there, right? Is research, like them learning about things that are maybe outside their core expertise, and developing a really good network of people that are as smart or smarter than they are, right? That they can learn from and absorb from, right? And then focus, like, is another key piece of that, right? Focusing on the things that matter. It's easy to say, hard to do, but like those are the common traits, and if you look at anybody who's doing well, you typically see those things pop up or surface. So
Yeah,
Andre, we went
absolutely.
way
So,
over, by the way. Like this has been great. I've really enjoyed this conversation. We should do it again soon. We should, have you back on the show, or, whatever we want to do there. I'd love to continue this conversation, but
yeah, absolutely.
I I do want to give just a quick, I just have one final question for you. How do people get a hold of you? Like, how do people, if they want to start a conversation or something that was going on, like in this episode, they're like, you know what, I wanted to flesh that out. I wanted to a little bit more of a question that I wanted to get an answer to. How would they reach out to you and get a hold of you?
Yeah, so they can type on LinkedIn Andrei Zinkevich. They will find only one bald guy on LinkedIn with that full name. So that won't be a problem. Yeah, just feel free to connect and send me your questions. I'm always open and happy to chat.
Awesome. Andre, it was great talking to you. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.